I love the DLR. Possibly because I don't have to use it every day, but there's no denying that it's pretty unique amongst London's transport systems. In contrast to the gloomy tunnels of the Underground, it offers an elevated view of one of the most interesting areas of the city. Apart from that, though, it serves an important transport function and has been absolutely essential to the regeneration of the Docklands area. Let's go back a bit and have a look at how it came about, shall we? In the 19th and 20th centuries, the London docks were a pretty big deal. In their heyday, they were the biggest port in the world, covering 5 London boroughs, 8.5 square miles, and providing employment for hundreds of thousands of people. But come the 1960s, and that was all to change. The reason for this was one simple invention: the shipping container. These are standard-sized boxes that can be loaded straight from ships onto lorries or trains with no need for complicated handling. This reduced the space and staff required at ports, but more importantly for the Docklands, it resulted in the construction of large cargo ships, too large for the old docks to handle, and so operations moved downriver to Tilbury. The effect on the Dockland area was devastating. It's no exaggeration to say that life in East London revolved around the docks. Warehouses and wharves that had once been worked to capacity fell into disuse. Families that had worked in the docks for generations were now on the dole. The area fell into a depression. But while the Docklands didn't have much by way of jobs and infrastructure, what they did have was possibilities. Vast areas of unused, unwanted land, only a short distance from the financial centre of London. The potential for commercial and residential development was enormous. An organisation was formed by the Secretary of State for the Environment, Michael Heseltine, in 1981. This was the London Docklands Development Corporation, in charge of overseeing the regeneration of the area. The corporation was initially received with local hostility, as is often the case with redevelopment schemes, but it can't be denied that they achieved their aims of turning things around in the Docklands. Essential to their scheme was transportation. Actually, the question of improving transport links in the area was an old one. The idea that had been favoured in the 70s was a new tube line, the Fleet Line. The idea was played with in various forms, but the Conservative government that came to power in 1979 wasn't keen on spending all that money, so the concept was dropped. The Fleet Line did partially open in 1979, but you would know it as the Jubilee Line. So, a cheaper option was needed, and happily, one was available. You see, when the docks were still active, they were served by miles and miles and miles of railways. As the docks declined, so too did the railways. The powers that be were particularly interested in a line known as the London and Blackwall Railway. The London and Blackwall had opened in 1840, initially running from the ferry pier at Blackwall to Minories on the edge of the city, and extending into Fenchurch Street the following year. In 1871, the Millwall Extension Railway connected this to North Greenwich, not far from where Island Gardens are now. The network closed in 1968, but its infrastructure was still in place. The Victorians built their railways to last. So a new idea was proposed: a light railway, using the London and Blackwall's lines as its nucleus. One idea proposed running all the way into Fenchurch Street, but the money men shook their heads sadly at this scheme. Another would have run a line all the way up to Aldgate East and run trains over the Underground, but this was dismissed as impractical and, yes, expensive. So they decided instead to terminate at Minories, building a station there that you may know as Tower Gateway. There were to be 2 other termini. One was at Island Gardens, following the Millwall Extension Railway. The other took over the route of the Eastern Counties Railways line to Stratford. The infrastructure had to be adapted for the new scheme, but the advantage of light rail is that this can be done quite cheaply. Light railway trains can handle sharp curves and steep gradients far more easily than their bigger cousins. The new railway opened in 1987 and was an instant success. Actually, it was more successful than had originally been envisioned. The trains ordered for the DLR were single articulated units because it was originally thought that nothing longer would be needed. But demand was such that single units were often coupled together to form longer trains. These days, even at weekends, it's rare to see a single-car train. And the rest, to use a hoary old cliché, is history. The DLR is now more of a network than a railway, consisting of 24 miles of track and serving such far-flung destinations as Beckton, Bank, Greenwich and Woolwich. There have been proposals to extend even further, with Catford, Bromley, Beckenham and Dagenham all suggested for the future. One concept even proposes reviving the old Fleet Line scheme and running into Charing Cross. So who knows what the future holds? Not bad for a low-budget railway. Hi all, hope you enjoyed this regenerative episode of Tales from the Tube. If you did, then like, share, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, it's very much appreciated. But what do you think? Do you like the DLR? Would you like more videos about it? Have you ever succeeded in sitting at the front and pretending to be the driver? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you soon for another Tale from the Tube.